Okay, here we go. Stand by. 3, 2, 1, action.
Assume nothing.
Brash, bald-faced blasphemy.
Question everything.
I find it extremely hard to imagine.
Open your eyes.
It is quite all right to be an atheist.
The fastest growing group of people in the country has been measured as being those who have no belief or who are atheists.
You don't have to be apologetic or quiet about it.
Challenge the opposition.
You see religion on 100 fronts losing the argument.
And start thinking. This is The Thinking Atheist Worldwide.
So I just saw on the internet this trailer for a film called The Genesis Movie, or Genesis Movie. It may even be produced by Ken Ham. The trailer also features Ray Comfort, that kind of thing. And it uses lush visuals and a soaring cinematic soundtrack to sell the idea that we are all created by God. And I would assume if Ken Ham's involved, it's a young earth creationist angle, okay? And so they've got this really slick trailer out there, and it talks about the findings of legitimate expert scientists. And of course, I'm like, I don't think that means what you think it means. Well, in an entirely unplanned but fortuitous coincidence, I just released to my YouTube channel, and I'll include a link in the description box of this broadcast here in case you're curious, a speech that was given by Dr. Donald Prothero, who is, hey, look, a legitimate expert and scientist. He's a paleontologist, a geologist. He is one of the most respected and renowned experts in his fields. He's been a lifelong educator. He's written 30 books, over 300 scientific papers, peer-reviewed material, by the way. The guy has forgotten more about fossils than you and I will ever know. And he had given a speech 10 years ago, like 10-ish years ago, called Evolution, What the Fossils Say. It was based on his book of the same name. And the information was so rich and so good. I call it the creationism killer. The data presented one point after another in this rapid-fire fashion, the evidence that we are evolved creatures. And honestly, it's so much more wondrous than the book of Genesis anyway. But I had seen the material, and it was not all that well documented. It was a single camera in a dark room 10 years ago. And I asked Dr. Prothero, I said, look, if you ever give this material again, if you ever do this speech and you're anywhere in my zip code, tell me. I would like permission to bring cameras, and I would like to reshoot this speech so it might become available to a wider audience. Because I think the information is so rich and so good. I mean, it's overwhelmingly documented. It is just definitive. It's amazing. Well, he was doing a paleontology conference in Dallas, Texas in October. And so I dragged my cameras down there. We set up in a small studio with a small studio audience, and he gave an updated version of his presentation, Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. And I just released it to YouTube. It runs about an hour and 20 minutes, and it is jam-packed full of data. And I found myself watching it, even in the editing room, thinking of all the people who are creationists, adherents to the book of Genesis and the Adam and Eve story and all of that kind of thing, who have only learned a caricature of evolution, who just, they poo-poo it and they brush it off and they laugh at it and they mock it because they have no idea what evolution really is. I was once like them. But now seeing it presented by a credentialed, peer-reviewed, legitimate expert in the field in such a compelling way, I just thought it was one of the best stories we could be telling right now. So that video has released. If you're curious, you can find it by searching on YouTube, Evolution, What the Fossils Say by Donald Prothero. It's on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And I'll include a link in the description box. So if you see anybody pitching the Genesis movie trailer out there, this might be a nice addition to the conversation, which provides actual facts about dinosaurs and fossils and all those types of things. It really is good. So anyway, it's called Evolution, What the Fossils Say by Dr. Donald Prothero. And again, huge thanks to him for making himself available to have this thing redocumented. Just really, really good stuff. Okay. Tonight's show is a show featuring 3 comedians who are also atheists. And we'll get into how much of their non-belief filters into their onstage material in the course of our discussion. Steve Hill, Maryellen Hooper, and Keith Lowell Jensen are professional, funny people. And I just thought it would be an interesting conversation about life as a secular entertainer, what it's like putting yourself out there in front of very diverse audiences in very different parts of the country, and what compels someone to do this for a living. Now, if you are expecting an hour of punchlines and gags and stage material, this is not what this show is going to be. Interspersed throughout our radio discussion tonight, I am going to play a short clip from the comedy stage from each of the artists so you can hear each comedian doing what they do in front of a live audience. But the actual conversation is just an informal behind-the-scenes kind of thing. Because of their busy performing schedules, we had to record this conversation a few days ago. And just FYI, at a few points, the name of Robin Williams came up. And we spoke about Robin Williams before this recent news story came out where Susan Williams, his widow, told ABC News that her husband had early Parkinson's disease and that the coroner at the autopsy found signs of something called Lewy body dementia, which is a condition that inhibits and degrades the ability to think and reason. He had a disease that was potentially going to rob him of his gifts. And so certainly he had depression, he had anxiety, he had all these issues, but he may have been, by committing suicide, simply deciding to end his life before he became incapacitated. Anyway, we spoke about him and his suicide before that story broke. So we were framing that discussion essentially in the context of mental illness alone, depression alone, and that was the context we had at the time. But FYI, new information has since become available. And I think you can find that on ABC News' website. USA Today carried a story about it. It's been carried almost everywhere. But overall, I found this particular conversation just a pleasant, lively exchange among friends. It was really nice. Something interesting to hear about the life of a comedian, a secular comedian, and sometimes one who brings non-belief into the punchlines that he or she delivers from the microphone. So I hope you enjoy the show. Keith Lowell Jensen, Steve Hill, and Maryellen Hooper, thank you so much for being here on the radio. Great to have you.
Thank you.
Hey, Seth.
Great to be here.
I'm going to start with you, Steve Hill. Kind of give me your story in a nutshell.
I was born on the north side of St. Louis, dirt poor. Graduated high school, went to the United States Marine Corps, got out of that, worked in aerospace. Then I got bored with that and went and worked at 2 different maximum security prisons. Got bored with that, and I started a real estate appraisal firm, all while doing political humor. And when I was discriminated against by a local church group here, I turned my barrels towards doing atheist comedy for the atheist circuit, conferences as such.
I'm going to come back to, you've given me 5 or 6 things we have to talk about. I got the Corps, I got aerospace,
Wow,
I got
that's
maximum
light
security prisons. Wow. Maryellen Hooper, kind of give me a quick bio real fast for the audience.
I got tired of people laughing at me for free, so I went into professional comedy, and I'm not out on stage as just like there's a lot of religious comics who aren't religious on stage, but I've kind of, now that I have 2 kids, realized that I need to not hide who I am and just be who I am. So I've won awards. I've been on the Tonight Show. So I'm a real comedian. So
who was the host? Who hosted when you were on?
See, that's the dividing line. See, it used to be, it was Johnny. That was the coolest. Jay. So I did it 2 times with Jay. So now it's, now you got to be cool to do it with Jimmy. So I'm the middle. I was 2 with Jay.
You know, I was dubious a little bit, and I like Jimmy, but I was dubious as to whether or not he could pull off the host of the Tonight Show. I think he's fantastic.
It's really fun. It's a whole new generation, and it's really good. I enjoy it.
Keith Lowell Jensen, give me the sort of Reader's Digest version here.
Oh, I was born in Corona, California, postal worker's son.
Say no more.
Lost, yeah, there you go. That's all you need to know. Lost my religion when I was going to continuation school when I was about 15 or so. I had a teacher who gave me Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha to read. Not intending to shake my Christian faith, just wanting to expose me to other religions, which is a really good way to shake your faith. Started doing comedy when I worked for Spike and Mike's Festival of Animation, and they started having me host, and just been doing it ever since. I've never been on The Tonight Show. That's awesome. But I do have a special out on Hulu right now called Atheist Christmas, and some albums out on Stand Up Records.
I recently reread the book 1984. It's a fun book to read on this side of 1984. George Orwell had some ridiculous ideas. Do you know that he supposed that by this point in our history, we would all be speaking in some kind of hyper-efficient newspeak? I tell you what, when I read that, I just LMAO. You know what I'm saying? I just LOL'd and L'd and L'd and L'd and L'd and L'd and L'd. What's interesting is the thing that Orwell never could have foreseen is that we would all go out and buy the cameras ourselves. And that our biggest fear would be that no one's watching.
Keith, we're heading toward Christmas. Is that something that you hear quite a bit from people who are non-believers in a literal Christ? What are you doing, Keith? It's Christmas. You doing a Christmas album? Do you catch any of that?
Yeah, a little bit, surprisingly. One guy on Twitter was particularly angry. It was like, that's atheists cashing in on Christian privilege and this and that and the other. It's like, I don't see Christmas as we celebrate it in our culture having a whole lot to do with the Christian religion anyway. It certainly has roots that are outside of the Christian religion, and it's silly and fun, and I like it. I never get any grief for celebrating Halloween or any of the other holidays. So.
Do you enjoy Thursday? Oh, yeah. Well, do you believe in Thor? No? Well, okay. That's kind of how we approach
exactly.
Christmas. The day is what you make it. How about Steve or Maryellen? You guys do Christmas? Do you do the holidays?
We do it the old pagan way. We have a tree and we have a fat guy in a red suit. So it's the season of giving and commercialism here. It's the season of, Mommy, I want this. Yeah, we kind of do the thankful Christmas without the baby Jesus. So, and I explained to my boys that the tree was here first and the Christians stole it, but it's still ours. So that's kind of what we do.
So you guys have had the hard discussions. I mean,
yeah.
You're like, we're not going to stick a baby Jesus. We're not going to stick a manger scene in the yard, and here's why.
Here's why. Yeah.
It's funny, Maryellen, you make me realize I'm probably more of a hypocrite celebrating Christmas as a socialist than I am celebrating Christmas as an atheist. It's a great capitalist holiday.
Yes.
Well, I remember back before the stores were open 24 hours, when people would actually show up at 1 a.m. and camp out in the frost and whatnot, and I just thought to myself, even as a believer, I thought, is this what we've come to? And
right.
Then you go through the list of all the crap that people went crazy for that were obsolete the following year. I mean, Teddy Ruxpin, anybody remember that?
Yeah, the Furby.
Oh, yeah, Cabbage Patch Kids.
I got an eye for a Furby.
Furbies were huge. The Tamagotchi, or is it Tamagotchi pets? Those little cubes that supposedly had a personality. You had to feed them and pay attention to them.
Kind of makes you all think we're just all celebrating a big fat corporate holiday, doesn't it?
Big fat corporate holiday. Steve, what's your take on Christmas?
That's all it is. Everyone in my family, in my household, is staunchly based in reality. We all take Christmas for what it is, and that's when small businesses and big businesses alike make a majority of their profit for the year by getting everybody to go out and stimulate the economy for them. And that's how we deal with it.
We've been kind of laughing because every year the stores get earlier and earlier, and this year the baby Jesus is getting scared by Frankenstein on the shelf next to him. So.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was in the stores the other day. All of the Christmas displays are up. Even Lowe's. Even Lowe's has a big Christmas tree up you can buy for like $700. Nice tree.
Ugh.
What kind of tree costs $700?
It was a fake.
That has to be a marijuana tree.
Flip a bud off every month.
Steve, I want to come back to something you said a little earlier. You worked in aerospace. What did you do? Can you give me
I was actually, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a machinist. I went to Los Angeles like the next day and got a job working as a machinist in a factory, making aerospace parts. And I worked my way up and was retrained into CNC machining, which is computer numerical control, kind of like robotics. But it just became boring. And I decided I wanted to do something a little bit more exciting, and I joined the Department of Corrections to go work in the prison system.
Okay, so after all of this, you decide you're going to join the ranks of the hugely profitable and secure job description of public entertainer. I mean, you essentially went from a quote-unquote day job to the starving artist in some ways, didn't you?
Oh, no, I'm not. Oh, no. Don't get it wrong. Don't get it twisted. I ain't starving. I own a real estate appraisal business.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, I'm just saying, I know you guys are good. You make a good living, probably. But at the same time, it's got to be dicey. I mean, you're self-employed in that respect.
Right. And that was one of the reasons I opened the type of business where I could work independently and alone and not really be too reliant upon someone else cutting me a paycheck. But the one thing I do regret is winding up working as most of my clients are banks, basically, which is kind of disgusting. I feel like I'm driving a getaway car for the Ku Klux Klan.
Oh my God.
Because I'm working with the banks. You know, I was on the front line. I started my business in 2004. I saw literally thousands of people lose their home or make the financial decision to walk away from their home. I saw kids uprooted, from their schools and from their, stationary base of security, basically, when you have a home. But then you see all these people lose their homes and no one goes to jail. Although when I worked in the prisons, there was tons of blacks and Mexicans locked up. But then, it shows you this two-tiered legal system we have where some people can buy their way out of prison. And if you don't have the financial ability, your ass is going to jail.
God, Steve, you sound like you should run for office.
I was just going to say, and you found comedy in that. How?
Hold the presses right there, folks. I will be running for state senate of the 21st district of the state of California, and I'm getting ready to prepare my campaign as we speak.
Maryellen, did you know, or are you just that intuitive? Are you that lucky?
I'm not running for anything. I was in a beauty pageant once, and I won the talent portion. So that's all. That's me. That's all I'm doing.
There you go. Get in where you fit in.
I did know.
Regarding the working in a prison thing, Steve Hill is tall enough. I just picture you in the guard tower with an AR-15 or something. Something about that. You just seem like the muscle. If I'm watching the movie, you're the guy who comes in to take care of business, kind of thing. So, how tall are you?
I'm 6'7".
Yeah. All right.
What?
Yeah. But
you
know
look
what?
Shorter in your headshot.
Oh yeah, I'm much shorter in my headshot.
It depends where you hold the headshot. You got to hold it a little higher.
So, I mean, obviously this conversation today is just not a series of gags and one-liners. We don't have an audience in place. We're just talking about who we are, what we do, and I'm intrigued by people who do comedy anyway. Comedy for a living has got to be hard. Let's talk for a second about the heckler and how do you handle it? And what are some of the best and or worst experiences you've had? Anybody? I'll let you start.
I can write a book about mine. Well, being a woman, I tend to get sexually heckled a lot. Show us your party parts. But see, that's the type of guy who doesn't have women as friends. So there's different categories of hecklers, and you got to figure out which category they're in. There's the drunk guy who's just oblivious. There's the I'm the funny guy heckler who he's the one who's always making his friends laugh, and now his friends are laughing at us. So he's got to join in and be part of it because now he's like, wait, what the? And then there's the guy who, like I said, who doesn't have women as friends. So he's got to turn it into a sexual thing. So women to him are either, sexual objects or mothers so he's going to say something sexual. Now that used to really derail me and it used to scare me to death because I had a guy literally pull his pants down in front of the stage and start screaming at me to get over here because he was going to teach me a lesson while he was touching himself.
Wow.
So,
oh, geez.
And I looked at the security guards on the side of the stage, and I said, "What exactly do you have to do to get thrown out of here?"
No kidding.
Oh my gosh, it was horrible.
Wow.
I mean, but I've had women flash me. Well, of course, that was in Vegas, but I was talking about, well, they were strippers, and they walked in, and everybody looked, of course.
You know, you just broke a cardinal rule, because you know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
I'm taking it out.
For real.
I'm taking it out. Well, they walked in late on purpose so everybody could look at them, and then I just kind of made a face. I don't know if you guys know that I make faces sometimes, and she said, "Honey, all you need is $3,000," and pulls up her shirt. And of course, you know, the next line makes or breaks it. So I just said, "Well, thank you so much. I just don't have time to window shop right now." So I was very lucky that I was that fast, because that could have gone badly. But then I had offers from them after the show, so it all turned out. We're Facebook friends now.
You probably become more adept at it, don't you? I mean, at first, when you're first starting out, your heart stops and you freeze, and then after a while, you got ammunition ready.
Right, but you get comfortable in your own skin, and you know that for the most part you can just repeat what they say, and then the audience is gonna just go, "Oh, shush up," and you just let them talk for a little bit, and then the audience is on your side, and you could pretty much say anything. I mean, the reason you get into comedy is because you're funny and you're fast. You just have to get to that point of comfort. So that's why newcomers are a little off with it, because they're just not comfortable on stage yet.
Keith, Lowell, Jensen, what's your take?
You know, it's one of the things people always want to ask about, as if it's a really big part of our experience. And maybe because I'm a dude and a white dude at that, it's a lot less of a thing for me. Good clubs bounce the hecklers pretty quickly. If you don't, depending on how you engage them, it's pretty easy to shut them down. And I also had the experience of knowing people who were hecklers, and I used to call them helpers, because I tried to remember that in their mind, they're helping the show. The worst hecklers will often walk up to you afterwards and say, "Oh, we had some fun, huh?" and want to shake your hand. Like, they don't get that they're derailing something that you've worked very hard on. So I started doing this thing where I would just, I would acknowledge them in this real sort of new agey self-help way and say, "Hey, I want your needs to be filled too." And I would have the whole audience repeat after me. I'd get their name, and then I'd be like, "John is an important person," and I'd have the whole audience say, "John is an important person. You know, John is deserving of our love and attention." And they'd all say, and then I'd go out and I'd give John a hug, and that usually shut John up.
That's awesome.
You know, and it allowed me, because the worst was when I would put hecklers down really hard, and then I'd feel bad, or maybe even sometimes lose the audience because I put them down too hard, you know, and it would become a mean sort of thing. It can also be really hard to transition back into your material from that, because you might have sort of broke character. So I tried to keep some affection for them, but deep in my soul, I hate them and I want them to die.
Yes.
And if I could wish for them to choke on their buffalo wings while they're making an ass of themselves, that would be great.
Well, I saw a whole documentary I think it was called Heckler, and it was about people who do comedy for a living and what they sometimes have to go through. So that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, it started out about heckling, and then it became about Jamie Kennedy's huge ego. That was a documentary about
he was
how
featured
nobody should ever pick on him.
Disproportionately, I thought, considering the sort of the...
Well, it was his movie, wasn't it?
Pardon me?
Yeah, it was his movie.
Yeah, he produced the movie. That's why it just became all about him, and people should... Like, he went from heckler to critic. Now, critics can have at it, and they're welcome. You know, a heckler is a different thing, and the second half of the movie was all about people that criticized his movies. And it's like, well, dude, your movies suck.
I think his take is instead of critiquing the work, like The Mask 2, I think, came up, and now that you say he's a producer or what have you, it makes total sense that he was featured so much. I thought maybe he was all they could get. It's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Jamie's free. No, let's get him on camera, kind of thing. You know.
He sat with one movie critic and said, "Well, how does it feel now? Would you say those same things to my face?" And the guy looked him right in the face and went, "Yeah, Jamie, your movies are terrible." And I was like, "Yes." It's just beautiful.
Steve Hill, you've been heckled on stage?
Actually, yes, I have. And I don't know if I should say by who, but it was a very memorable experience, which was very...
Oh, wow.
Very uncomfortable.
Say it.
Say it.
We want a name.
I went and performed for a friend of mine at Winter Rogers at the Secular Coalition of America back a few years ago. And Jamila Bay was sitting up in the front row. and boy, she was annoying. You know.
God.
And since I'm not like Maryellen and getting paid for this,
Sure, yeah, right.
It threw me off. It made me skip to a different part in my routine where I should have been. But I was smooth enough to transition into the next joke that I was getting ready to say. But I don't like the whole heckler thing. For one, it's annoying, and it can throw you off. And I think most people do it because a massive consumption of alcohol will make you do that, make you look stupid in front of everyone. And I don't like taking the meme comic approach and turn the whole situation into something negative. So I try to make a joke about it and move on.
It's really presumptuous. Essentially, the heckler's declaring to the audience, yeah, you paid, but I'm going to be the show.
Right. I want to get in on this guy on stage act who has prepared, who's practiced, who's stood in the mirror more than I would ever want to admit, practicing. And now it's my time to help you, buddy.
Yeah.
No, it's
and you earned the right to be there. You went to open mic nights, which are hell. You went and you probably performed in some people's living rooms. And I mean, the crap we do to earn the place on the good stage at the real show. Oh, right. Man, it's hellacious to get there. And then this guy, no other art form do they do that. I heard someone recently say you wouldn't go to a Slayer show with your guitar and be like, hey, I'm going to take this solo, buddy.
Talking here with the comedian Steve Hill, Maryellen Hooper, and Keith Lowell Jensen. Tell me about the first time you ever took the stage as a comedian. Paint that picture for me. I'll start with you, Steve.
First time, I initially went into this, I wanted to be a writer. I thought all the good jobs, like on the late night shows, like, oh man, I could write better jokes than that. So I took a class at the Ice House down in Pasadena. Bobby Oliver was the instructor's name. Good comedian, great comedian. And I didn't know that in the scope of the class that you would have to actually get up and do 5 minutes on stage at the main room at the Ice House. And that's what happened. That was the first time ever on stage. And when I got off, someone asked me like, wow, how long have you been doing comedy? I was like, about 5 minutes. It was horrifying. It was really an adrenaline rush, man. When I got off stage, my leg was shaking uncontrollably. And the next thing is I got to do that again because it's such a adrenaline rush.
What was your first joke, Steve?
Oh, I was making jokes about Obama.
There you go.
That was back during, I think, 2007 primaries.
Do you remember the joke? I realize it's not really the format here. You're not in front of a crowd who can really react.
I was just asking the audience why was jokes about the first black presidents off limit and why were black people getting so offended when you tell jokes about Obama. And then, of course, I would dive into a couple of Obama jokes.
Maryellen Hooper, first joke, first day on stage, whatever.
Well, let's see. I was living in South Florida, and in Fort Lauderdale, there was a club called the Comic Strip, and comics would come from New York and LA, and so we get to watch the great comics coming up. So this is back in 1985. This is my 30th year. I started when I was 10, and so I went to the club and just to watch the show, and they announced that they had open mic night on Monday nights, and I thought, oh, that's how you become a comedian. I didn't have any idea how you do it. And I was a theater major, and wanted to be a funny actress. So I thought, well, this is a way to get on stage. So I went and watched open mic night, and I thought, well, I could be at least that bad, because it was a lot of horror. And so I went back and I wrote jokes about being a hairdresser, because I had been doing hair for a couple of years, and it's a comb, not a wand, and silly stuff. And I talked about my dad being a cop. This is my very first joke. Okay. My dad arrested my first date. He charged him with possession of condoms with intent to use. But I was really proud because not knowing anything about comedy, that's an actual joke. I mean, that has a setup and a punchline.
You did it. Sure,
that's
the big thing.
Joke.
Yeah. So you.
Was it hard
so
to
I
write?
Really, I felt like, oh, I really have that. Looking back at it, I knew what I was doing. So, but it went really well, and I think because I had a background on stage, so it wasn't like the first time I'd ever been on stage, so awkward that way. I was comfortable on stage. So, and that's like 80% of it is taking charge, and so yes. And then I thought, well, they told me I could keep coming back, and I kept coming back, and then one night the MC's car breaks down and you're on, and it just keeps going. So
Keith Lowell Jensen?
Yeah, I've almost got a few, because I mean, my really first time doing comedy on stage was fourth grade. I did a ventriloquist act for a school talent show, and I just did who's on first, the old Abbott and Costello routine. And I remember at the first show, I did really well. And my mom was in the audience, and then she had to go take my little brother to kindergarten or whatever. So for the second show, for the older kids, I went on stage, and it was my first time bombing. I forgot all my lines, and I was talking when my ventriloquist puppet was supposed to be talking, and doing his voice for me and my voice for him, and and it was the first time I felt that horror of you're on stage and you're blowing it, you're sweating, and your face is warm. It's so terrible. So that kept me from doing it again for a very long time. But then when I worked for Spike Mike's Festival of Animation just as a promoter, one night Mike, who realized that I watched him every single night introducing the show, said, "You want to do this, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd like to do it sometime." And he said, "Well, I'm not feeling it tonight. Go." And he literally shoves me on stage. And people say, "Oh, I was shoved on stage." No, I literally shoved on stage. I'm standing in front of a couple hundred people at UC Riverside. And so I just did Mike's act, because I had memorized it from watching him so many times. And it went great. And so then I just kept doing that, and each night adding a couple of my own jokes. And it was the best sort of training wheels way to get into comedy. I'm really lucky that way. For anyone who their first time is open mic and having to work through that horrific scene, this was a dream. So the first time I hit an open mic, I was already pretty experienced at being on stage and holding a microphone.
I saw a documentary on PBS just recently. It was a biography, actually, in the memory of Robin Williams. And they had interviewed him, and he was saying that as a comedian, you either kill or you die. I mean, the descriptives for how you do are pretty hardcore. Oh, he killed. That's
you
wonderful.
You bomb, you murder, you destroy.
Yeah.
It's about domination. So that's, you're taking the audience, and they have to have faith in you. So you have to be in control. So it really is that.
Well, when you really made it is, and you're really coming into your own, is when you can really solidly bomb a joke and then recover and still give the next one a fair chance. In the beginning, once you bomb a single joke, you're done. You just can't recover from that one, and all the rest of them fail. And and then you get better, and you bomb it, and you're able to look at the audience and go, "I'm okay if you are," and just move on.
Right. Again, it's just that confidence. I've had in my introduction is that I won the comedy award, and so if a joke doesn't work and the audience is kind of like, "Oh," I'll say, "Oh, don't worry, I won an award." It'll
right.
Okay.
It's you, not me.
So is there anything to this? All comedians have at their core a center of angst and pain. Because you hear something like, the reason they're funny on the outside is because they're tortured souls on the inside. Is there anything to that? Or is it just a bunch of crap?
My therapist disagrees. But no, I've had probably some of my best shows when I was the most upset. I mean, it definitely is a form of therapy and getting it out, and you definitely can have an edge then. It feels real. That's what I find. But there are a lot of people in every profession that are mentally challenged, don't you think? I think
exactly.
Hey, I think it's absolutely essential that you have that ball of energy in your chest when, that kind of pushes you out on stage and allows you to just let go. I do a lot of venting on stage about things that people don't like to talk about, like racism and, the LBG community and hatred towards this group or that group. So, yeah, you got to keep that anger. It gives you a certain sharpness.
I'm interested in the kind of portrayal of the Janus mask, though, the happy on stage and sad and filled with angst in the rest of their lives. I mean, those people probably exist, right? They're happy on stage, but once they step off and they click into the real world, there are people who face some real darkness, and I always thought that was kind of an interesting thing, but not ever having really seen behind the scenes, it's hard to really know. I just thought maybe you
the best comics, though, show some of that on stage, too. I don't think they completely wear the mask. You look at going all the way back to even like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. Just looking at Buster Keaton's face will break your heart. And I think my favorite comics, they actually do talk about depression on stage, and they do talk about that aspect of their life on stage. I mean, it's a sad-faced clown. More than the comic that just goes out there and is like, hey, I'm happy and everything's great, and then falls apart afterwards.
It reminds me of Charlie Chaplin when he took on The Great Dictator, which was at the time a huge taboo, right? And he impersonates Adolf Hitler, right. And he's handling some very dark, real-world subject matter, but he's doing so from the perspective of a comedian, of a satirist.
And in modern times, he takes on poverty, and it's basically a socialist propaganda film, and it has great lines in it like, no, they're not thieves, they're hungry. That's pretty heavy stuff for a comedy from a guy who started doing, Keystone Cops type stuff.
The comedy stage then provides a kind of freedom, a latitude you might not get elsewhere. Steve just alluded to it, the stuff that people don't want to deal with, but you get in a room where you're pushing the edges of the envelope, and now we can really start to talk, right?
Right. It helps when people are fulfilling their 2-drink minimum.
Yeah.
Because it kind of takes the edge off for everyone. I performed at some conferences where you could look at the people laughing, you can tell they're uncomfortable laughing. And I've had
right
at the up in Denver, I performed at the conference, and the name of it was Celebrating Secular Diversity. I don't know if they were anticipating seeing a black atheist comedian, but
you were typecast.
One of the people in the audience said that was the most fun I've ever had, being uncomfortable. And that was like the best compliment I could have ever received.
Nice.
Put that on a business card, man.
We got issues we dealing with, and God is not helping at all. We got anybody in here from the LGBT community? LGBT, where you at? Be proud of you. Fuck that. Be proud. Yes. That's right, man. Thank you. Give them a round of applause just for being here. You're a double minority like me. Atheist and gay, atheist and black. Shit, it don't matter. Once you say atheist, you're pretty much fucked. That's right, man. People in my LGBT community alone. That's right. Shit, I got a gay daughter.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's right, man. I got a gay daughter. That's bipolar. Wow. Yeah, so that means sometimes she's gay, sometimes she's just happy.
Talking about the things that many people don't really want to talk about.
George Carlin has a great story about playing Las Vegas, which he said was the only place where people would come to see him who didn't know who he was or what he was about. And he wanted to make sure he was pushing the limits. So he hired a kid to stand in the lobby and count people leaving. And by intermission, if he hadn't walked enough people, he knew that he had to up his game.
I can't imagine ever taking the stage and saying, I'd like to drive people away. I just can't imagine
right.
Stones to do that.
Yeah, I'm not that comic.
Well, if we're talking about difficult subjects to broach, we must, of course, get into the fact that you are non-believers in the supernatural, all three of you, yes?
Yes.
Indeed.
I know each of you approach it differently. Maryellen on stage, probably. Do you approach religion at all?
I keep trying to stick my foot out, and I keep getting chased back into the closet with pitchforks and brooms, and it was just, I do a joke about evolution, and I say back when we were all monkeys, and literally they boo and they hiss at me, and it makes me so sad.
Where do you live?
Steve and Keith, do you guys have to make the same considerations when you're on stage, or what?
Yeah, I try to make my set a little bit more conforming to mainstream America, but I'm still going to do a particular amount of atheist jokes, even if it's just one joke that I do all night. I can't leave it out. I would consider that kind of selling myself out.
So if you're doing a show in Fayetteville, Arkansas, you would still do atheist humor from the stage?
By the time I finished that set, they would know this guy's an atheist.
Okay.
You guys have different crowds, okay? So me, I'm the mom, I'm the, storyteller. So it's like I'm at a tea party, and it's polite not to talk about religion or politics. So that's the crowd that I have.
I think I got to taste that kind of crowd a little bit. I just did the Great American Comedy Festival in Norfolk, Nebraska.
There you go.
And it was weird to me because they're grown adults, and I'm told that I can't say a curse word, and their list of words we couldn't say included piss and things like that. I'm like, really? I can't say that? And hopefully I can say that on your show and just blow it.
Whatever you want. Whatever you want.
Oh, good. And that just amazed me. I'm like, come on, we're all adults here. It's nighttime, But I did say that I was an atheist in my set. I got a shocked silence to it. But the joke followed what I call the Dick Gregory rule, which was you can make fun of them if you make fun of yourself first. And the joke was actually making fun of atheists and making fun of the fact that we do conferences. Once I do that, they really loosen up, and they're kind of okay with me, because it's like, oh, okay, he's not just going to totally savage our religion or do that thing where you do like intentional blasphemy just for the shock points. And then they're cool, and then they're chill. And I even, like in Winnemucca, Nevada, I had a kid come up and want to take a picture with me because he said he'd never met an atheist before. I was like, well, I'm sure you have, actually, but let's take a picture. Like I'm Bigfoot. I spotted one. I'm trying to be out of focus as much as I could.
Yeah, they treat me like Bigfoot, Keith.
Oh, the 6'7",
a black atheist, yeah. You're really a rare bird.
I'm playing for the other team, and I didn't even know it. We had one of those Sunday assemblies here in Florida, and I showed up, and a fellow comic, Devin Sebald, was there, and we both turned and looked at each other, and we're like, you? And he's like, you? And he told me, he goes, oh my gosh, everyone thinks you're uber religious. I'm like, why would people think that? He said, because you work so clean on stage. Everyone just assumes that you're religious. And I'm like, I've been getting credit for the other team. And that was when I realized that I don't have to talk about it on stage, but I don't have to hide it in my real life. So I actually did the documentary Hug an Atheist, because it was, all about positive and, that we're real normal people. Right. And I think the atheists were kind of at the point that the gay community was when the only gay people thought that they knew were the ones they saw in the gay parades, the ones who were naked and, doing crazy stuff. And they're like, oh, those gays are so crazy. Well, the ones that middle America sees out are, the Bill Maher's and Penn and Teller and the crazy ones, and the ones that are going to the Playboy Mansion, and they're, so they don't know that there are kinder, gentler, atheists. So part of the open secular, be secular for me is not that I'm walking around with banners, so to speak, but because I do have to take care of my children, and I do have to, be wary of the scary thing that's out there, but teaching them not to hide. If it comes up, that we don't hide, and that we don't, judge other people, and to be kind and to live that. So that's why I'm sticking my foot out, and I'm, like I said, not hiding, because I'm very much want to be part of the movement, because I believe in it, and I want to create a safer world for my children to grow up and be secular, or whoever they want to be. So I try to be part of the problem without, getting us killed. Yeah. So that's my motto.
Maryellen, I could write you some jokes that can change all that.
Okay.
The trajectory of her career takes a dramatic turn as of today.
That's right. You'll be on BET in a week.
Yes, I know.
I think it's so important to have people like you with that attitude in this community, because people like Dawkins and Teller oftentimes scare people away who then don't want to be part of the atheist movement.
We're talking about working clean, Maryellen, and
yes, dear.
This brings me to something else I've been curious about, or I've noticed at least, and wondered what your perspectives were. Sometimes shocking someone can be funny. It's funny because it's unexpected, because it rattles their cage. Yes. And you find people who will just jump into a place you never expected and just shock you, and then you laugh. It's a reflex. And then you find those people who shock because they simply have no other tool in their tool chest, right?
Right.
They're going to find the most inflammatory thing, concept, word, action, whatever, and do it, even if it's not funny, thinking if it's extreme, they will laugh. And it's interesting to watch people fall on both sides of this. Shocking when it's funny and shocking and just sort of being offensive.
Your audience will write that material for you. Your audience will let you know what jokes to let go. Because when you get that awkward feeling when there's no response and people are just staring at you, you'll know you've crossed the line and you need to get the room back.
The thing that drives me crazy about it is that the people like you mentioned that are just doing the shock for the sake of the shock, and they think they're edgy and they're cutting edge. They will name Bill Hicks and Doug Stanhope and George Carlin even as sort of heroes of theirs, and they're following in that mold. And they aren't at all, because those guys were shocking because they were saying things that they believed with all their heart. They never once said something just because it was shocking. They're up there with a lot of conviction, and that's what was so shocking about it, was holy shit, they're being sincere.
Does Lenny Bruce, you think, fall into that category? Or
Absolutely. Lenny had so much heart and conviction and had so much to say, and that's what has made him enduring, because frankly, a lot of what he had to say isn't shocking anymore.
Well,
but it sure was at the time.
Yeah, he was just out front, way out front.
I think that there's a difference between shocking and controversial. So people like Doug Stanhope and Hicks, they're controversial because they're, like you said, they're talking about topics that may be taboo. Now, just graphic, horrible, describing sexual positions and things and stuff, that's just pure shock, and there's nothing to that. And that's the difference. If you walk out of a comedy club feeling like you need to take a shower, okay, then that's not talent that you've witnessed. It's just shock. Now, if you walk out of there feeling a little edgy and like, oh, and you're thinking a little bit now, and ooh, what did I just hear? Then that's just controversial, and that's great comedy in that genre. That's my opinion of it. That's how you know. If you're just saying, I went to the effing store, there's no reason for you to say the F word there. Okay, but if for some reason, if you have a punchline and that's the word, then that's clever and that's funny and that's a good use of the word. But just gratuitous cussing and graphicness and I think that is lazy.
Don't you think that someone like Doug Stanhope, though, can kind of do both? Because I've seen times when he just relishes in the fact that, yes, this is making you squirm, even though at the heart of the bit, there is a point.
Well, he's flashed me on stage, too. So.
I'm very sorry for your loss, Maryellen. Yeah.
I was standing next to his mom. He could have been flashing his mom. I just assumed it was me. I'm not sure.
So where does something like the aristocrats joke fall into this? I mean, because it's the way over the top, hit people over the head with a sledgehammer, offensive avalanche kind of thing, but it's its own kind of thing.
It was never a joke for the audience. That was always a joke for us. That was an inside. I was kind of mad they made the documentary because it was the end of this sort of inside joke for comics.
Right.
And it's usually done losing the audience anyway.
I'm sorry, Steve, what?
A buddy of mine worked on that, Emery from the Ardent Atheists. Yeah, matter of fact, that's first time I saw it, he gave me a copy of it. I think that was a little inside baseball there.
Well, for those who are not really sure what we're talking about, does somebody want to tackle describing, within the boundaries of good taste, describing the aristocrats and what we're talking about here?
Why don't we let Maryellen take that one?
She works clean. I heard that rumor. Yeah.
But see, that's what was funny. Me backstage doing that joke was hysterical.
I'll never see you in the same light again, Maryellen. It's terrible.
I would pay so much money for a tape of that.
All right, what was the aristocrats? What is it? Somebody describe it.
Go ahead, Pete.
So this family walks into a talent agent, and then you describe their act. And where you put your personal touch in is just how foul and degrading and offensive and disgusting you can make their act. And then the punchline's almost just not even, that's an afterthought.
Right.
But the punchline is the talent agent says, that's quite an act. What do you call that? And then they say, the aristocrats.
Essentially, it's just a signal that the madness has come to a conclusion is what that punchline is, isn't it?
But you know what, Seth, what I relate that to is in our profession, it's so frustrating sometimes when you're just trying to say a joke and it doesn't work or that you get so jaded by it all. So the only way to make another comic laugh is if you're watching your friend and they're dying on stage, well, then you're going to laugh really hard at that. Or if you tell this ridiculously thing that you would never, ever say on stage. And I relate it to my brother's a firefighter. Now, in order for him to do that job in private, they have to make the most horrible jokes about the things that they see and that they do, that if anybody, and every once in a while, somebody outside of that profession will hear it and just be aghast. But just think about it. You couldn't do that job every single day if you personalized everything that you saw. So it's just a release. Right. It's just a way for us to laugh. Like, it's so hard for us to get that gut belly laugh that civilians have, because we're so jaded and we know how the trick is done. So it's kind of a way for us to really just bond with each other and just laugh, because it's just so ridiculous. So I think... And
the stuff that we laugh at when there's a carload of us is it's all like that. It's idiotic. I mean, we're the biggest morons in the world.
Right.
I saw a special with comedian Chris Porter a few months back, and he made a reference to the fact that because he's a comedian, people come up to him and just want to be funny. So it's a self-conscious attempt to sort of, hey, high five, bump elbows kind of thing. I'm funny too. Or they think that because you're a comedian, funny is the only language you wish to speak. Do you find that's the case? People walk up and automatically find out what do you do for a living, and now everything is a little bit more, they're forcing the punchlines, they're acting a little bit more. Do you find people are performing more in your presence?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
It's annoying.
I mean, you've never come across somebody you thought, oh, geez, you're hysterically funny.
Yes. I've had people come up to me and give me tags for jokes, and 99% of the time they're terrible. But me and my friend Johnny Taylor, another comedian, were just talking about it. He got a great tag for one of his jokes last night from an audience member. So every once in a while, it almost makes it worth it, sitting through all the ones that are just insufferable, that you get this guy who is genuinely funny. They're never going to get on stage, and they're like, here. And, wow, really? Thank you.
I was going to ask what you do with it. So they don't get like a credit. You just sort of say, hey, that's great, and then you just roll with it. Is that how it works, or what?
I'll ask them. It's happened to me twice. I've gotten 2 tags from audience members. I'd already written the joke. They were small tags, but they were very funny. And I said, are you giving me that? Can I have it? And they say, yeah. And I say, cool. If you ever see me and you tell someone that you wrote that, I'll say, yes, he did.
Cool.
And that's all they wanted. They were happy with that.
Yeah.
Well, I have a friend who wants to be a comic so bad. So their thing is, if I can make the comedian laugh, I must be funny. So they're always trying. But he's very biting. Right. Like, he'll say, like, he took a picture of me in some pants and it gave it to me. I'm like, wow, I look really good. He goes, yeah, I helped you out on the bottom of those pants. I slimmed it up a little bit, waka. And I'm like, I'm still a girl. Stop it. So, it's like, what? You don't have a sense of humor? And I'm like, no, I have estrogen. There's a limit.
That's hysterical.
Well, that's my favorite, too, is they'll say a joke that's not funny and then go, oh, for a comedian, you don't have a very good sense of humor. And it's like, no, actually, I have a really good sense of humor, and your joke was bad.
Right.
Like, trust me, I'm the professional. Your joke sucked.
Well, then you get into the subjectivity of humor, right? What is funny to one person may not be funny at all to someone else, which may become a challenge. So now you're having to consider your audience everywhere you go, right? Do you fashion material based on where you're going?
Yeah.
We all do somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to a certain degree, but it's good to write. And this is the way I write my material, for maximum audience laughter participation. And when you have those jokes or not. And I think I fall into that category of just being able to write material for the masses. Is that too messed up to say? Can I say that?
No. But, for me, I'll do the same story, but I'll do it with a different emotion. Like, if I'm in the South, I'll do a joke, but it has to be that I'm sad. Like, if I talk about my husband and he electrocuted me. But now if I'm up north in the Northeast, I have to do the same thing, angry. I'll go, my husband electrocuted me. So it's really interesting that where I am in the country as to how women feel about their place in the world and how I have to deliver a line.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, I'll know when I'm not getting the laugh that I need to change my mood towards it, my attitude.
Yes, I am a new mother. Yay for me. Okay, thank you. It's wonderful. I didn't have any pain during the delivery. I didn't have no stretch marks, no trouble losing the weight. Well, I adopted. I still got an epidural because I wanted to get my legs waxed. Look at the girls. Oh. It's so funny. Whenever people find out that I adopted, they always say the same thing. Oh, did you have to adopt? Are you infertile? No. It's just my husband and I went to a carnival. There's more. They have this photo booth where they take your photos and they morph them together to show you what your children are going to look like. That's why we adopted.
Maryellen, do you think it's harder for women to break into the business of comedy, or is that just a misconception?
Well, I think it was, because there weren't very many. And like I said, it's very much a dominant thing. So it's like, I have to take control of this situation, and you have to be secure enough to let me lead you. Now, there are a lot of men who don't have that. And so they're the ones that are going to sit there with their arm crossed and say women aren't funny. And it's just because they're not evolved enough. So, but nowadays, and I used to get as much work as I would lose. So like say there's 4 guys on a TV show that they're putting together, and they'll say, oh, we should get a woman. So I'll get the job because I'm a woman. But now they'll say, another TV show will say, well, we already have a woman, and I won't get it, but they'll have 8 guys. So I think it balanced out that way. But I always judge it as how hard it was to make an audience laugh. And it's getting easier and easier as people are more used to women and trusting us and letting us do our thing. And, the fact that we can vote, that helped a lot.
Voting is important.
Hey, Maryellen,
doing it a long time.
Can I ask you, I feel like here in California, the audiences are more than 50% female now, and it's been that way for the last 5 or 6 years. Is that true in the rest of the country as well?
But then it's a date night, right? And so then a lot of times here in the South, a woman's not going to laugh unless her husband or boyfriend's laughing. I have been in the bathroom after one of my shows where women will come in not knowing that I'm there. This woman actually said, well, I thought she was really funny, but my husband didn't think so, so I guess she wasn't. And I just kicked open the door, and I'm like, do you need a safe place?
Wait, so you're in Alabama, and she has to look up and decide that Cletus approves before she's able to laugh out loud? Is that the deal, or what?
Yes, and you know what? I get asked to perform so many of these women nights out, and they are amazing because then they don't have that codependent feeling that their other half sitting there, and they just let loose, and we just have the greatest time. And so that's why I know, because we keep having these women nights out, that women still feel that,
Yeah, I think it's a good night anytime a woman doesn't have to ask permission to laugh.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Let's put that on the ballot.
Talking here with comedian Steve Hill, Maryellen Hooper, Keith Lowell, Jensen. Forgive the cliched question. I know as an interviewer, people are going to be rolling their eyes. Who inspired you? But tell me, who makes you laugh? I mean, who makes you laugh?
You doing that voice? Do it again.
Who makes you laugh? I don't know where that came from, but whatever. No, come on. There's got to be somebody, and you're like, if they're in town, I got to see them. If they're on HBO, I got to see them. Or if we go to a dinner party, I got to see them. Is there somebody in your circle that really resonates with you? Anybody?
So many.
Well, give me a few then. Give me a few.
Richard Pryor is master. As far as people that are alive now, I just went and watched Patton Oswalt record his new special. I went to the early show and then stayed through and watched the late show too because it was so amazing. I wanted to see him again.
He has a brilliant piece on, it's called The Christmas Shoes, where he tackles, there was a religious Christian band or musical group called New Song that did this song about the Christmas shoes, about this guy whose mom has cancer. And he goes to buy shoes he can't afford so that when his mom dies, when she meets Jesus, she'll be well dressed. And Patton Oswalt just destroys this whole concept in a brilliant way. And someone animated it. So you can actually go to YouTube and type in Patton Oswalt Christmas shoes. And it's, it's awesome.
His bit Skycake might be the best take on religion done yet. I mean, so good.
Yeah. Well, the comic who makes me fall down and actually laugh out loud is Brian Regan.
Oh, yeah.
He just tickles me, his silliness and because we kind of have the same fan base, right? So that's my sense of humor. It's dignity under duress. It's being in embarrassing situations, and he talks about that all the time, like John Panette and Adam Ferrara, and all these guys are the guys that I started with. So we kind of, like I said, have that same thing. And Richard Pryor, because he's a brilliant storyteller. I remember watching his movie in the theater, his special, and crying so hard. I was laughing. I couldn't breathe. I had to walk into the lobby. I was laughing so hard. So I just really like that physical dignity under duress, that Fanny Bryce before me, and, Tim Conway and his greatest, and Carol Burnett. And, I wear all that on my sleeve. So those are the guys who still make me laugh to where I can't breathe, which is awesome.
Steve?
Well, I'm going to tell you, folks, contrary to popular belief, George Carlin is the only comedian that I can just watch over and over and over. And I think it has something to do with his social commentary, his truthfulness in his material. People laugh at things that they know are true. And as you guys can see, everyone will go down in history laughing with George Carlin, because he continually, even though he's been gone a while, he continually makes people laugh, and he continually, all of his material, he spoke the truth. And, a lot of people always come up and ask, oh, well, who's your favorite comic, Richard Pryor? And the first thing I say is no, he's not even third. I think Bill Maher would be second, because he speaks a lot of truth in his comedy.
But that's your sense of humor, Steve, so because that's what you do on stage, so that's what's going to make you laugh, and that's why comedy's so subjective, Right,
very much so. Very much so.
When somebody is new starting out and they ask me the best advice that I can give them, and I read this in an old book, but it's how to find your sense of humor. It's carry a notebook for 2 weeks, and anytime you laugh out loud, whether it's something you see, something you hear, anything, you write it down. At the end of the 2 weeks, you read them, and that is your sense of humor. It'll either be physical, it'll be observational, it'll be shock, political, whatever it is, and that's what you should be on stage. And you can tell a new person because they're going to do a little bit of everything because they don't really know what they're doing. They're going to say, when I was a little kid, I got beat with a Hot Wheel tracks. And then, did you see the president today? And you ever notice a banana? Right. And you're like, they're just all over. But the true guys and women who rise above are the ones who create these characters, and they're in a genre, and that's their sense of humor. And that's why sometimes you'll do a joke and it'll work one night and not another night, because it's not really true to what your character is. It's funny that that's what you said. You do political humor and social commentary, and then it's obvious because that's who you love. So that's really case in point.
When I started doing comedy, they said, oh, don't do it because you want to make people laugh. Do it because you have something to say. And that's when comedy all kind of fell into place for me.
Yep.
And I think that what Maryellen just said about sort of your character and your voice on stage, it calls back to what we were saying earlier about hecklers. You might be an expert at shutting them down and dealing with them, but you just broke your voice to do that. You just went away from this character you were creating because now you had to be something else. You had to be like a security guard for a minute. And that's, I think, that kind of sums up why it really sucks for someone who's a pro, who's really developed this. And maybe there's another level of pro where you manage to do that while maintaining your character. But that's part of why it's so awful.
Yeah.
Right, Glenn, that's the secret, is to do it in character. So when I deal with a heckler, I'm pretty much treating it like a mom because I'm a mom. So like I'm going to treat them like a little kid. And a lot of times I'll say, put your head down, you're in the timeout. I'll let you can enjoy your group again.
I would think as a performer, you would have a love-hate relationship with alcohol, right? Because first of all, it's great. It loosens people up.
Yeah.
But also it's, who was it who said that alcohol amplifies the personality that you have? unfortunately, it amplifies the personalities that they already have. So it's sort of a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, because if you amplify the attitude of an idiot, that's what you're going to wind up with, an idiot that's twice as bad, or big of an idiot as he can be with a couple of drinks.
With no inhibitions, or very few anyway.
You know, I might be unusual in this way, but I will take a dry audience any day. I prefer theater audiences. I don't want a drunk audience. I don't think it helps me that much to loosen people up. A good opener loosens people up for me. And maybe it's that I don't drink. I get a lot of these benefit shows for legalizing pot. I don't consume pot either, but I'm in favor of legalizing it. So I get those shows. And I tell you, I'll take a stoned audience to a drunk audience any night of the week.
I've never performed for a stoned audience. Keith, you're going to have to bring me along.
Oh, sure you have.
Oh, sure you have.
What do you think's going on in the parking lot before the show, Steve? You need to get out of that green room and go check out what's going on downstairs, buddy.
We've referenced Carlin a few times. I brought up Robin Williams. Can I just ask you personally about Robin Williams, his life and his death? It was such a shock. And to see someone who was so buoyant and so, I don't know, his stuff is just transcendent, for lack of a better word. He just went to a whole other level. And then under the surface is this roiling sort of darkness. You know, he had these real personal challenges that ended his life so tragically. So when it happened, how did it affect you? And what are your thoughts? Anybody want to talk about Robin Williams?
Yeah, it was like, you know how you play Jenga and you pull that one at the bottom and everything collapses? That's kind of what I thought about seeing him go in that direction. Because I always thought of Robin Williams as kind of like a comedic savant, where he's like really, really, really overcompensating for his comedic genius. And then some things, some traits and characteristics, he's at a deficit because of the imbalance of being a savant, where you're just way too good at something that you probably shouldn't be. But he was just brilliant. And I've been watching this guy since the 70s, the mid 70s. And to see him go, it's just horrible. But then that brings you to another thing in our society, which is mental illness, and how people deal with it or how people don't deal with it, and the stigma is attached to mental illness, especially in the African-American community. But I imagine a comedian where you're supposed to go out and take control of a stage, for you to have some kind of mental weakness would be like the worst thing in the world.
I think I was Louis Anderson in a television special that had spoken about, maybe it was someone else who was speaking about how he was most at home on stage, and the rest of his life he found ill-fitting. So he would crave those moments where he was performing, even after shooting television shows all day. He would go out and do the comedy clubs at night. He was happy on stage, and everything else may have had, I'm just reading this into it, but it may have just not have lived up to the standard. You know, everything else was a letdown.
One thing that's very nice about living here in Northern California, being close to the Bay Area comedy scene, is that I got to work with Robin a lot. And he would just show up at open mic nights and at showcases. And there's a great theater here in Mill Valley called the Throckmorton Theater. And Robin was there most Tuesdays. You know, and he would go up and do a set. He would hang out in the green room and tell stories with us. And yeah, he did. He just, so many comics, stand-up is a path to something else. Then they don't really look back. And boy, Robin got that something else in droves. You know, he was a movie star and so successful in that avenue, but he always came back to stand-up. His heart was in stand-up, was always performing stand-up, and in person was just the nicest, most gracious, generous person. And I promise you, this is exactly how I talked about him before he died. You know, you almost feel self-conscious, like, you know, wow, he died tragically, so now we're going to say wonderful things about him. But all of us who met him were just like, wow, is that just the nicest person you've ever met in your life, or what? You know, incredible guy.
I know he'd done a lot of, I don't know if it was USO or something, but he did a lot of traveling overseas to perform for the troops. He did a tremendous amount of philanthropy work to just help the less fortunate, you know, to help feed the hungry, Comic Relief being a great example. He seemed to want to give something back.
Can I plug real quick that there's a new movie coming out called Be Robin, and it's produced in San Francisco, and it's about Margaret Cho and her Be Robin campaign, which was trying to take coping with his death and make something positive out of it by doing the kind of things he loved to do. So she went out busking and used it to raise money and then raise coats and things like that for the homeless of San Francisco. And so it's by a SF comic named Kurt Weitzman, and I think it's going to be a really great film.
So it's a theatrical release, or it's coming to HBO, or?
I'm not sure.
We'll just Google
it's called
it.
B. Robin. So if you just Google B. Robin, Margaret Cho, you should be able to get details about it. It might be direct to DVD. I have no idea.
Maryellen Hooper didn't want to miss out on maybe any perspectives you wanted to offer up regarding Robin Williams. Anything to add?
I met him a few times, and I concur that he was very sweet and gentle. There's a theater up where he lived, and like you said, you would think that he would be tired of performing and all, but even on his off nights, he would come down to that theater and hang with us just to be around it, just to jump on stage.
I would have hated to be the person who had to take the stage anywhere near that man. They say you either set the standard or you're compared to the standard. How does a comedian take the stage anywhere near Robin Williams? It'd just be so intimidating.
Well, he went up before me that night and destroyed. And, if you can't hide it, you paint it red is the saying we have. And so I just went up and I said, I'm sorry, I was just changing my resume to say that Robin Williams opened for me. So you just have to, roll with it. And then everybody acknowledges, okay, that is hard. And then you move on. But just trying to go up and not acknowledging it, that would have been ridiculous and stupid.
It's funny, though, from my experience, following someone really good doesn't make it harder to the degree that people think. I mean, you'd better be pretty good. But if anything, it almost gives you a couple bonus points. The association, the energy level's already high, the audience, that you just have to continue the momentum. So I actually don't mind following. Maybe if their energy is really high and yours is down low, you might have to ramp it up a little. But the whole thing like, I'd hate to follow him, I don't actually find myself thinking that very often. It's usually the opposite. It's like, oh, cool, this audience is going to be pumped. They're going to be ready.
Yeah, right, they're still buzzing.
Still buzzing.
Wow, there's a weird synergy now that's going on. All of you are saying the same things at the same time. It's uncanny. Any final thoughts before we call it a day? This has been kind of a relaxed show, a behind-the-scenes look at what it might be like to be a non-believing entertainer, a.k.a. comedian. Anybody have any final thoughts on kind of where you're at and what you'd like to see happen?
Where I'm at is I'd like to bring Maryellen out into the daylight.
Like by the
sun
feet?
From where I am, Mr. Hill. I see the sun.
I like to take her to a black church with me and just let them have it.
I accept your challenge.
She'll fit right in.
We'll head to Ferguson first.
I did an interview on video I'm going to be releasing soon with Mandisa Thomas, and she was talking about how if you're a black non-believer, it's a double whammy, right? You didn't just betray your God, now you've betrayed your race. The challenges for the black secularist are just enormous, more than most people realize.
Oh, people have no idea.
We have a little bit of an idea.
Oh,
We've been to lectures.
Magnify that by 10.
But will it ever change?
I'm going to change it. I'm going to change it single-handedly. That's it.
I love you, Steve.
Love you, Steve.
You're doing the Lord's work.
It's been nice knowing you, Steve.
Yeah.
For me, I wish that people would treat atheists the same way that they treat people of other religions, and that is just leave us alone. Just leave us alone.
Yeah, that would be nice.
It's just like I know that I see it all the time with the parents in the school, and there's a mom who is happens to be a Jewish mom or a Christian mom, and they're speaking. And then a Muslim mom comes up, and they all are cordial and they're nice. And I know that if I were to say I'm an atheist mom, that I would part the waters, their hair would stand up, and they would run screaming. And it's just like, just treat me with the same tolerance that you treat each other as religious people.
Isn't it wonderful though what a uniter you are? Like you bring them all together in their fear of you.
Right.
I'm trying. Do you know what? I did one of those.
Throw rocks at the atheists.
I did one of those women nights out, and they took me to dinner afterwards, and they were so Southern. This is in Alabama, and they were very sweet, and they're just talking. And the one woman got her food first, and she said, "Y'all don't judge me, but I'm not going to say grace." And I just said, "You know what? Here's my chance." I said, "I would never judge you. I'm an atheist." And everybody laughed. And then I went, "No, really." And then they stopped laughing, put their heads down, and ate very quickly. But I tried.
And they all said grace.
Yeah, trust me. They were praying harder than you can imagine.
Keith, do you have any final thoughts for us?
Yeah, I mean, Steve and Maryellen have said some pretty hefty things, and I too have a desire for the world to come out of my comedy, which is that everybody will go to Hulu and watch my special and rate it really highly, and I'm pretty sure that'll bring about world peace and curb global warming.
That's an awesome segue. I really was going to pitch what you guys wanted to pitch here at the end.
You never have to set me up.
Do they go to Hulu? Do they go online? Do you have a website, Keith? Where would I send people?
Rockass.net is my website. Keith Lowell is my handle on Twitter and on YouTube and on everything else, Instagram. And if you just look up the word atheist on Hulu, two things come up. One is this great Bollywood action film called The Atheist, and then the other is my comedy special. So
I thought you were kidding. I just typed it in, rockass.net, and your website pulled up. Forgive me for ever doubting you. I thought you were being funny.
That is a URL that ties back to a joke that I used to do a billion years ago that I don't even do anymore, but I'm still stuck with the URL. So
I'm relieved that it's you and not something else. With that particular website, I could have gone horribly, horribly wrong, Keith.
Horribly wrong.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead and try rockass.com and see what happens. Rockass.info. I don't know, rockass.gov.
Not doing it. Steve, where do people find you, my friend?
My Twitter handle is Steve Hill Comic. Website is stevehillcomic.com. And I'll be running for State Senate District 21. I have a Facebook page, Steve Hill for State Senate. You can. I'm maxed out on my friend's account though. I'm at 5,000. So that Facebook page is where you can find me.
Maryellen Hooper, how do people find you and your work?
I'm on, mine's very cryptic, like Keith's. It's MaryellenHooper.com. And I'm on Facebook. And my thing is I'm actually working on a secular, funny children's book because there aren't really very many. And it's about the separation of church and state for kids and with a funny twist. So it might take me a little while, but that's my goal.
Hey, Maryellen, when that comes closer to fruition, ping me about it. Let's see if we can get together because I having come from sort of a deep-seated indoctrination, right? I come from a culture where we were hyper-targeted by the church as children because that's when you get them, right?
Right.
And so when there are materials out for children that encourage questions and curiosity and discovery and those types of things from a secular framework, I'm very interested. So have your people contact my people, and let's do something about that when you get closer to the finish line, okay?
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Steve Hill, Maryellen Hooper, Keith Lowell, Jensen, thanks for spending an hour on the radio. Thanks for your great work, and most importantly, thanks for making people laugh. Really good stuff.
Love you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening tonight. Next Tuesday's show is called Programming. And we're going to address the programming of young children, the targeting of young minds by religious institutions, religious people, religious dogma, and quite often the consequences that these young and innocent people face when they either grow up inhibited by superstitious thinking or they decide they no longer buy it and face consequences from their families and communities. In fact, we're going to talk to a young lady who's the product of a Mormon family in a Mormon church who decided she no longer bought it and her own family tossed her out of the house. And she's going to share her story and talk about how she sort of started fresh after being programmed by the Mormon Church. That's coming up next Tuesday night on the Thinking Atheist radio broadcast. I'll see you then.
Follow The Thinking Atheist on Facebook and Twitter. Watch dozens of original videos on the Thinking Atheist YouTube channel. And visit our website for resources, links, contact information, the editor's blog, and more. thethinkingatheist.com.